The fifth round of negotiations with Iran over limiting its nuclear capability ended in Vienna last Friday, but not surprisingly, just how much progress was made depends on who you ask. A spokesman for the European Union Foreign Policy Chief, Catherine Ashton, who is coordinating the talks, said that the drafting of a deal had begun, while Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said the sides had, quote, agreed about the title. He went on to urge the six powers on the other side of the table to, quote, abandon excessive demands which will not be accepted by Iran. Such demands include strict constraints on uranium enrichment and deep cuts in Iran's nearly 20,000 centrifuges in exchange for relief from damaging economic sanctions. Clearly, still much to be decided, with less than a month before the self-imposed deadline for an agreement. Later, we'll hear opposing views from two leading scholars, one from the University of Tehran, the other from a US-based policy institute. But we begin at the negotiating table, and the latest from correspondent Sandra Gathmann in Vienna.
It's been over 10 years since Iran and Western nations have tried to initiate a lasting settlement to international suspicion about Tehran's ambitions to build nuclear weapons. Historically frosty relations and mutual distrust have made talks difficult. But for the first time, against the ticking clock of a July deadline, negotiations are intensifying. Last week, a fifth round of crunch talks between Iran and the UN Security Council's 5 members, the US, UK, France, China, and Russia, plus Germany, began to draft what is to become a final deal to resolve the issue.
It's always dangerous to have expectations when you're in a long negotiating process. What I can say is that there was drafting work carried on and that we spent a week of intense and solid, serious work. So clearly, you know, things have moved, and we've spent a long time trying to get to the real detail of the main issues.
The main issue being that the U.S. wants to remove Iran's capacity to quickly develop a nuclear weapon in the future, even after a deal. That will mean reducing Iran's stockpile of centrifuges used for uranium enrichment from 20,000 units down to the low thousands, and for nuclear activity monitors to remain in the country possibly for years. But Iran insists on its right to nuclear development and that Western demands are excessive.
We feel that the other party, P5+1, has adopted a new tactic for negotiations. They try to ask for maximum demands so that during the negotiations they can discuss and reach more reasonable terms. This is an approach that some negotiators are using, but I do not believe in that, nor do I think it is useful.
Iran also wants Western sanctions to be lifted, which the other 6 world powers agree should be part of the final deal, but phased out gradually.
Chairman Mao said 2 initiatives are better than 1, and I think it's probably suitable for current Iran nuclear negotiations.
But experts say fine-tuning the deal goes beyond finding a compromise. Both sides want assurances they will do what they say.
There are different technical perspectives on this issue, which may be natural, but because of the lack of mistrust, then get interpreted as the other side actually is not serious, or the other side may actually be looking for something else. That is constantly lurking in the background, which is understandable. At the end of the day, 35 years of enmity between the United States and Iran is coloring everything that is happening in this negotiation.
For many, the possibility of reaching a compromise has been helped by the fact that, unlike his predecessors, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has engaged in a diplomatic outreach with the West. And more recently, now that the Tehran-Washington relationship is being tested over increasing violence in Iraq. The territorial advances of Sunni militants in the region are a mutual concern, and many hope that commonality will widen prospects for better diplomacy.
All of these issues are either hijacked by the lack of resolution on the nuclear issue or exasperated by the lack of resolution on this issue. So at a minimum, I think it has added incentive and pressure to get a deal by July 20th, because otherwise additional issues are going to remain unresolved. And some of those issues are very, very dangerous to both the United States, to Europe, and to Iran, and also to the other P5 states. We should not forget that the Russians and the Chinese take the threat of Sunni jihadists very, very seriously.
So, with pressure mounting, a marathon of intense talks will continue on July the 2nd. For both sides, the costs of failure to reach a final deal loom as large as the costs of compromise. And that realization might be the driving force that will push all sides, in the end, toward an agreement. Sandra Gathmann, CCTV, Vienna.